say, before I get started here this morning, how grateful I am that each and every one of you are here. I know this is a scary time, and we appreciate it. But you are here because you want to be here, because you're making the choice to be here. And that's a fabulous thing. These guys, not so much. And yet they're here. Yeah, they say they want to be here. Okay, good. That's the right thing to say to the person who writes the check. They're smart guys. I also want to welcome into the sanctuary a visiting minister, Reverend Tony Jackson from Unity of Richmond is here. So glad to have you in the house this morning. Great. Did you use all the extra prayer help we can get around here today? Let us prepare ourselves. Put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And over your ears. I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
All right, great. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that the expression of God known, I'm sorry, I will stay right here. Yes, right here. I'm not going to be wandering around today, so if you see me, you just say, get back. Okay? The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that the expression of God known as Mother Earth has been endowed with perfect balance. And the expression of God known as you, each and every one of you, has been endowed with perfect balance in our life. Even those of us who tend to more the extreme behaviors. You know, I'm not, moderation has never been even mildly attractive in my life. You know, when I first started in recovery, one of my sponsors said, the blessing you will have is that you will now know what serenity feels like. And I thought, oh my God. I don't really want serenity. It wasn't attractive to me at that time. But even those of us who tend toward the extreme, even those of us are hardwired for balance. But let's be clear, like the affirmation said this morning, balance is not 50-50. Balance does not mean equal halves. We're each unique individuations of the one. And for some of us, balance is 8 hours of sleep and 16 hours of rest and activity such as watching TV or reading or maybe playing tennis. And for others of us, balance is really 16 hours of activity. 6 hours of sleep and 18 hours of activity. Some of it may be even more extreme than watching TV and reading and playing tennis. Maybe we're jumping out of airplanes. Whatever it is for us, we are unique individuations of the one. It's our expression in our life. Balance is for you to find your equilibrium in life. You know what? But like all of the qualities of God, like love, like compassion, like abundance, balance is there all the time. We're endowed with it. But it's up to us to feel it, to recognize it, to experience it in this life. It's when we don't feel balance in our lives that we become unhealthy in our body, in our mind, and in our spirit. When we don't feel balance, we become crabby. We become fearful. And if there was ever a time not to become fearful, to ward against extreme fear, this is that time. When we're tired, we begin to create conditions that in our lives that make us think that we're poor, that we're not creative, that we're not lovable, that we're not beautiful in our life. We start using words like overwhelmed. The only reason you and I get overwhelmed is because we are out of balance. So let me say that again. The only reason that you and I feel overwhelmed is because we are out of balance. There is no spouse in your life that can overwhelm God. There is no child, even your teenager, who can overwhelm God. There is no debt that you're facing right now that can overwhelm God. God never uses the Al-Anon salute. Oh, poor me, I'm just a victim of God. Never. You are God in form. You are a representation of the presence and the power of God. And as a result, there is no outside condition that can overwhelm you if you are in balance. Now, the good news for us is that God, the Creator, Goddess, Allah, Elohim, whatever it is that we call that energy, that essence of love that is around us all of the time, has given us a holiday, a holy day in which to remind us about this quality of God called balance in our life. This balance which welcomes day and night, this balance, this source energy that welcomes rest and activity, joy and sorrow, full and empty, spring and fall. The holiday is called Spring Equinox. It's very hard for me to stand in one place. The quality of God is called Spring Equinox, and it's the grandmother of all the spring holidays on the religious calendar this time of year. Spring Equinox came before the Jewish holiday of Passover. It came before the Christian holiday of Easter in our life, and it is a pagan holiday. Now, those of you who have been coming for a while, and some of you at home know that the word pagan simply means dweller of the countryside. That is all pagan means, dweller of the countryside. It is not a devil worshiper. The devil is a Christian concept. It is not a pagan concept. Pagans worship both the Creator and creation equally in their worship. Their Bible is found in Mother Earth. It's found on the earth floor. And if we were to study Mother Earth with the same scholarship, the same intensity that many of us study the Old Testament or the New Testament or the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran or the Sutras or the Tao Te Ching, if we were to study Mother Earth with as much scholarship and intensity as that, we would yield the same freedoms that those scriptures can yield us in our life. Spring Equinox gives us the goddess Ostra in our life. Now, Ostra is where the word Easter actually comes from. The Christians were smart. Some people get mad at Christians for stealing the things of the pagans, but I think they were smart, and I think they're doing exactly what we're doing, except for one thing. We always honor those we steal from. We honor those we in our life. We don't act like we thought it up. We know who thought it up. And that's true. You know, in the Bible, I have 7 Bibles in my office, and the word Easter is only in one of them. And it's only one time in one of them. Ostra is where we get this idea of Easter. Spring Equinox has many traditions that we are familiar with. Bunnies, for the whole idea of the abundant spring, because bunnies are quite abundant, aren't they? And Easter eggs, colored Easter eggs, that comes also from Spring Equinox. But you know, like Easter, Spring Equinox has a message that is much deeper than bunnies and Easter eggs. Its deeper meaning can, if we allow it, make a difference in our lives. Balance and new beginnings, new shoots, new life, springtime, coming of new things in our life that will give us hope for any discard we might be feeling right now in our life. And hasn't this been a wonderful week to celebrate spring and Spring Equinox, the beautiful warm weather in the beginning of the week, and then this lovely spring that washes the rain that washes the spring bulbs and cleans the earth. My hope is that all of you have or will take a lunch hour, take a morning walk, and walk outside and see all of what God has laid out for us this spring. Spend a moment in front of a tree and just ponder the new shoot. What does it look like? Where did it come from? What will happen in a few days or a few weeks with that new growth? To really ponder it. But here's the thing, we don't do it. I don't think many of you, I haven't done it. I don't think many of you have done it, taken that time to really ponder what God has laid out. And the reason I think we don't is because we're dashers. I'm a dasher. I'm dashing from one thing to the next. You know, I need this as much a reminder as much as anybody. We're dashing from one leisure project to another, from one chore in our home to another. We're dashing from one self-help book to another. We're dashing from one fad diet to another. We're dashing from one hobby to another. Why are we dashers? Why are we doing that? I think in part we're doing it because we're trying to prove to somebody that we're good enough, to prove to somebody that we're worthy. See, we forget that we are whole, perfect, and complete right now, just as we are. We don't need to do anything else. We don't need to embellish ourselves in any way. If you're breathing, you're worthy. Breathing, worthy. Breathing, worthy. Keep saying it to yourself all week. Breathing, worthy. If you're breathing and your heart is beating, you have a place on this planet. And you're worthy of happiness and abundance and love in your life. Now notice, I say you're worthy, but I don't say you're entitled. And I always like to make this remark because worthiness and entitlement are different things. Entitlement suggests that you think some other human being should give you what you want or what you need. There is no other human being that should give you what you want or what you need. And the good news is, doesn't need to be, because God has already given you what you want and what you need. It's done. God's done God's job in our life. You have it. God knows you're worthy and has given you everything you need. Breathing, worthy. Breathing, worthy. The one who needs to understand your worthiness is not God, it's us. We need to understand our worthiness. So I want you to say with me in it. Those of you who are joining us from home, say this with me out loud as well. I am worthy of love.
I am worthy of love.
I am worthy of lots of money.
I am worthy of lots of money.
I am worthy to be creative.
I am worthy to be creative.
I am worthy of leisure time.
I am worthy of leisure time.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
I am worthy of people speaking nicely to me.
Remember that. Remember that. You are worthy. You and I don't need to run all over the place trying to prove ourselves to the point of exhaustion, to the point of getting ourselves out of balance. The please like me stage of your life, that can be over right now. That can be over this morning. The notion that someone else has to think you're great or that someone else has to say you're good enough can be retired right now, this morning, in celebration of Spring Equinox. We can slow down. We can become more balanced. We can take time to hear from the people and listen to the people that we love. We can take time to feel the sun on our face. We can take time to drive to Daffodil Hill and consider how the daffodils are growing. They neither toil nor spin. They are worthy of your gaze just because they are. Ernest Holmes tells us that everything learned can be unlearned. And I want to say that everything unlearned can be relearned. Because you knew all this when you came to the planet. When you came to the planet, you knew what the lilies of the field know. That you don't do anything else. Nothing more needs to adorn you. You're worthy of their gaze. You're worthy of the world's gaze just because you are in your life. God knew what God was doing when you were created. And you may have added some thoughts, some behaviors, some ways of being that you want to let go of, but nothing more needs to be added onto you. Nothing more. But relearning that you're worthy is not something you can just hope for. It's not just something you can just think one time. It's spiritual practice. The reason we don't end with spiritual, we call it spiritual practice, is because you have to do it over and over and over again if you want to relearn what you knew when you got here to the planet. You got to keep it up. So here's some practical steps, because we're a practical church. Some practical steps to get you into balance and less exhausted by running around trying to prove yourself and learning you're worthy. The first one is this: stop comparing your insides to somebody else's outsides. Now, if your brain is saying, oh, I know this, I didn't need to come here this morning. Yes, you did. You did. Because we're all doing it. We're all comparing ourselves. If I were to stop my sermon right now and give you 2 minutes, everyone in this room would come up with at least one person you are comparing yourself to. Maybe your sister-in-law, maybe somebody at work, maybe somebody on television, somebody in a magazine. You're comparing yourself to somebody. We have to stop comparing our insides to somebody else's outsides. Do you know that all of us have crushes on people, and almost all of our crushes are platonic? They're not romantic crushes that we have on people. We imagine what their life is like, and we put them on a pedestal, and then we go and look in our mirror, and we start crying because our life doesn't look anything like their life. Our life looks pitiful juxtaposed to what we see on the outside, what people are showing us of their life. Crushes can only stay in force from a distance. From a distance. Bill Crosby, Justin Bieber, Chris Matthews, Lindsay Lohan, Tiger Woods, Lori Loughlin, Lance Armstrong, Michael Bloomberg, Martha Stewart are just a few of the people that we have put on a pedestal, and it would have worked if we left them alone. But we snooped, and we snooped, and we snooped, and we snooped, until finally they fell off. And we found out they were people just like us, with foibles just like us. Sometimes serious foibles that needed consequences, and they should have their consequences, but that doesn't mean that we get to hate them. It doesn't mean that we get to think that they are any less than human beings who made some very, in some cases, bad mistakes that indeed did hurt other people. But hasn't every single person in this room made a mistake that hurt at least one other people? Maybe not to the extent that those folks did, but to some extent, we've had some pain that has hurt other people in our life. And all of that is wasted time. Whenever we put anybody on a pedestal, know this: you have just wasted time on your spiritual journey, getting yourself back to where you want to be in the growth of your own soul. The second one is leave the past where it belongs, and that's in the past. That's in the past. Regrettably, there were people in your life, in my life, often named Mom and Dad, who in most of our childhoods didn't understand the worthiness concepts themselves, so they couldn't possibly teach us. We can only teach what we know. And we have now generations of people not understanding how important it is for us to understand the truth of our being, which is breathing worthy in our life. Some of us are lucky enough to find that teacher. Teachers in the church this morning, stand up. Stand up if you're a teacher in the church. We owe you a lot. We owe you a lot. We owe you a great deal. Thank you. We found that one teacher. We found that one scout leader. We found that one coach. We found that one neighbor who helped us, at least for a moment, understand how important it was for us to be worthy. But many of us got the terrible idea that we weren't enough, that we couldn't do enough, that we couldn't be enough in our life. And that robs us of our balance in our life. I have a friend who loved to plant gardens, and she hurt her shoulder, and she couldn't plant her garden that year. And her husband was working 2 jobs and said, honey, I can't turn this soil over for you because I'm already working 2 jobs. Hire a gardener. And she said, no, I'm not going to hire a gardener. Gardeners are for rich people, and I don't want people to think we're rich. And so she didn't have a gardener. from that one feeling. Her father told her that rich people had gardeners. First of all, it's not true anymore. Maybe it was true when her father was young, but it's not true anymore. You know, all kind of people think, oh, I can't get my nails done, only rich people. Everybody I don't get my nails done, but God gets my It's not just for rich people. Look, if your sense of well-being, if your sense of worthiness is hooked up in how rich or how poor you are or how you think people think of you, please see a practitioner soon, because you have work to do. It's not hooked up to that at all. Leave the past in the past. The next one is, and I learned this from Reverend Brenda, reframe everything in your favor. Everything. Leave nothing out. Reframe everything in your favor. It's a very powerful spiritual practice, but it's also very hard to do. You know, it's very hard to do. We have a woman in the congregation who last Sunday came up and told me after the sermon, she said, you know, Reverend Georgia, and I knew that she has cancer. Her hair had fallen out, and she was dealing with chemotherapy, and she was really depressed. And she said, I took into my meditation, last week was about Joe Dispenza, and she was listening to Dispenza's meditation, and she said, in the meditation, it came up to me that I should ask God, what's the gift here? How can I reframe this? What's the gift of my cancer? And she thought about it for a minute, and it came right away. She said, you know, I have a stepdaughter who's having a real challenge moving from her teenage years into her young adult years, and I became a helicopter parent. I spent my whole waking hours trying to fix this kid, trying to support her, trying to figure out ways to make her life different. She said, and when I got cancer, the chemo just knocked me out. I just didn't have any energy at all. And I couldn't be the helicopter parent I was. So I called my ex-husband and I said, I can't do this, you gotta take it. And he said, honey, I got this. I'll take it. And he did. She said, that was the gift. I was able to back off. It was not only a gift to me, because now I could see that I didn't have to do all this by myself, and it was a gift to her because she has her own journey in life. She has her own way of getting through life. And the other story I like to tell this whenever I talk about reframing everything good in your life. Most of you could lip sync it with me because I've told it so many times, but it's about my young friend Rogelio. Rogelio, for those of you at home who may not have heard this, Rogelio went to be with his grandfather for the weekend to give his parents a little getaway break. And so the grandfather, not knowing much about kids, goes down to the toy store and gets a plastic ball and a bat. And he brings it home, and Rogelio comes over, and Rogelio's getting a little bored, and so he says, Rogelio, go out in the backyard and play with your ball and your bat. And so the kid takes the ball and the bat, and he goes outside, and he throws the ball up, and he swings and he misses. Throws it up, swings and he misses. Throws it up, swings and he misses. He does it about 10 times. And the grandfather's in the backyard, and he comes out and he says, honey, how are you doing out here? You doing good? And Rogelio says, oh, Poppy, I'm the best pitcher ever lived. Reframe it. Reframe everything in our life. Now, you can reframe your bank account from poverty and fear to gratitude. It can take a minute, but you can do it. You can reframe your body from critical to complimentary. It'll take a minute, but you can do it. You can reframe any feeling of inferiority you have about not graduating from college. You can reframe that by looking at how great your accomplishments are without ever going to college. You can reframe it. It'll take a minute, but you can do it in your life. Once you start feeling worthy as a result of some of these steps, as a result of affirmative prayer, as a result of hanging out with cheerleaders, not awfulizers. I'm telling you, the next person who comes up and tells me how many people are going to die from this disease, I am running the other way. I've read it. I know it. It scares the hell out of me. I don't need to hear it again. And you don't either. Stay with the cheerleaders, not with the awfulizers. When we do these simple things, because spirituality is so simple. When we do these simple things, you will feel in harmony with Great Mother Earth. Now, we had hoped to be able to have a ceremony this Thursday night. We always have an equinox celebration. We are not going to be having an equinox celebration, it looks like. If that changes, I will put out an e-blast. So let me just say this. If you are not on the e-blast, please go out there and get a card and sign up, because that's how I'm going to be able to communicate with you for the next couple of weeks. The board is having an emergency meeting right after this meeting, after this service, to determine what our next steps are. I want you to know what our next steps are. So it's imperative that we stay together, both on Facebook and on e-blast. So make sure that you get this. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there is only one power. It's the power of the Most High. It's the power of the healer. It's the power of wholeness. And that wholeness comes to us through love. If we fill our body, our mind, and our spirit with love, there is no virus that can get in it, because love has already filled us up. No more room, just love. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the lawn. Together we say.
And so it is.